Good morning. Today is the 19th day of Cheshvan, the 3rd of November. And we are up to the 6th reading of Parshat Vayeira. And in the wonders this week, we put, I think, one of the deepest things we've ever published in English. This has to do with what we call here the claims of impurity against holiness. In other words, by becoming God's chosen people, but even without connection to God's chosen people, even in the time of Abraham already, there is a need to take responsibility for reality. And the interaction between Abraham and Abimelech at the end of our Parsha indicates that isn't always fulfilled to the utmost, and that the lower parts of reality have a claim against the holiness. And this comes from a point of view that to take responsibility means that you have to do certain things that are not always very comfortable for you in order to help and to guide those who need your guidance. So let's just tell the background of the story. This is a very famous verse that Abimelech speaks with Abraham, and it goes like this. At that time, Abimelech, accompanied by Pious, chief of his troops, said to Abraham, "God is with you in all that you do," meaning he recognizes that Abraham is completely different than everyone else, and God is with him in everything that he does, and that places Abraham in a position to be the educator, to be the one who's bringing godliness to the world. So now he says, "Swear to me here by God that you will not deal falsely with me." The Abimelech, who is the king of the Philistines, or one of the kings of the Philistines, he says, "I want you to swear, to make a vow, that you will always deal with me face to face, not falsely, nor with my son or with my grandson. The same kindness that I have shown you, allowing you to be in my land, you shall show to me and to the people of the land in which you have sojourned." Abraham replied, "I will swear." What is he swearing about? He's swearing about his role. He's swearing about the fact that he is taking upon himself this responsibility. Abraham then disputed with Abimelech over the well of water that Abimelech's servants had seized. And Abimelech said, so there was a well that Abraham had dug, even though Isaac is known for digging wells, and we'll see this 2 weeks from now. But Abraham already dug a well, and the Philistines seized it. Why did Abraham dig the well? He dug it in order to increase commerce. By digging a well, he made the water free for anyone who traveled, and he made it possible for people to travel safely and have the water that they need. And he did it all in the name of freedom. So Abimelech said, listen to this verse, "I do not know who did this thing." First of all, I don't know who did this. Nor did you tell me, nor did I hear about it until today. So that's his answer. 3 separate answers, each one of them indicating a certain claim against Abraham, which is a general claim against holiness. Well, it's not a claim that says holiness is wrong. It's saying on the contrary, if holiness is correct, if being a person connected to God is the right path to follow, this must affect everyone who's around. And Abimelech is saying to Abraham, you did not live up to the expectations one would have from a man of God. You didn't do your duty. And so let's look at these. So to analyze Abimelech's arguments, we must see him as a representative of all that is unruly, lawless, wrongful, and destructive. And Abraham is a representative of God. So Abimelech is coming and saying, how do you propose to fix the world if you won't take the responsibility over what needs to be fixed? The first argument makes the claim that I did know because you do not know. Meaning, I did not know about this because you don't know about it. In other words, I did not know who did this because Abraham didn't even know about this. How can that be? The idea here is God himself does not really care about the difference between good and evil. What does it mean that he doesn't know, that Abraham doesn't know? He says that there's an aspect that many people think that God seems indifferent. This is one of the most difficult things to contend with. By the way, I'm hearing this ever since I got back yesterday. I'm hearing it more and more in the media here. God doesn't care. There's no difference. Somehow, all the good things are forgotten. And then one terrible, really terrible thing, atrocious thing happens, and automatically God's not indifferent to the world. Doesn't matter how many times he answered my prayers. It doesn't matter how many times he saved the Jewish people from, in a way that cannot be even understood, over 3,000 years in exile. And yet, he doesn't care. He's indifferent. That is one side of it. The other side of it is even worse. Is not that he doesn't care about me. He doesn't care at all about the difference between good and evil. How do I know that he doesn't care about the difference between good and evil? Even the sages say this is a possibility. You could understand from the fact that it says, and it was evening and it was day, and it was morning one day. The evening represents the actions of the wicked, the day represents the actions of the pious, and it was one day and it's all one thing. God doesn't care between order and chaos, and therefore the impure forces have a right to live lawlessly, to live as they see fit. If God is indifferent, we have every right to run the world the way we see fit. They too can ignore all that does not lie in their own interest. To know implies an interest in what and who is outside of oneself. And if you claims to represent the superior morality, Abraham in this case, is not willing to take responsibility and care for those who are locked into their husk and are unwilling to see what lies beyond them, then that seclusion grants the forces of impurity the right to continue with their own seclusion and self-involvement. The impurity in the world expects holiness, that even while it nurtures and preserves its own uniqueness, it should still engage with those outside its circle, and understands that those that are holy, they have their own needs to take care of, needs of elevating in holiness, but they also expect them to care about what is going on outside. There needs to be an awareness that the other is also me, even if I'm holy and he's not. So even when I turn inward, I cannot ignore the other. When I ignore the other, I refute the claim that the other is eventually meant to find themselves and their rectification within me and my way. So if holiness has no way to say anything, it has no message to that which is improper, to that which is lawless, and so on, then it can't take the role of the leader. It can't take the responsibility of leading the world. So that was the first argument. The second thing he said, Abraham should have informed them of the theft of the wells, meaning Abraham should have taken the initiative to engage Abimelech. What this boils down to is that holiness should not always need to be completely self-contained, even in situations where the outside reality is opposed to it. There are instances when holiness can engage with the outside world, especially when there is a genuine issue. Now we're not even talking about that the other side is doing something wrong, but there are real issues in the world. Real issues that holiness has to have a say about. It has to have a position. In such cases, engaging with the outside can eventually lead to objective realizations that allow for a more complete understanding and even translation of my interest in the other into the language the other can understand and relate to. The need to present a position about global affairs, about things that have to do outside of my small sphere, actually translates, it teaches me how to translate my somewhat, call it inward language that doesn't usually translate into the language of the world, into ways, into things that people understand, and then it leads to some deeper understanding in the one presenting the position of holiness also. That has to be done as well, meaning you had to take the initiative to translate what you think into a language that everybody can understand. Right now, we're exactly in the same position right now. One of the things that one can see in this whole war with the Nazis in Gaza is that there's very little explanation of what does it mean that there are forces of evil in the world. People don't want to think that way. But you have to translate the whole thing with Abimelech in the Torah into language that people can understand. I tried to do that in my classes. I'm not sure that I did a very good job. But the whole point is that you don't have to wait until the calamities happen. You have to present your position in a way that can be understood. This was what the Lubavitcher Rebbe kept saying about the land of Israel. If you keep saying that the only right you have to this land is because 80 years ago 6 million Jews were killed, eventually people will forget about it. And it's not a good enough justification. In fact, it's a very poor justification. And yet you see that time and again, the ones who are representing, unfortunately, the Jewish people right now, who are the so-called leaders of the state of Israel, cannot utter on their lips the simple idea, or the deeper idea, that there is a God to the world, that there is something that runs the world, and there is a word of God in the world. And this word states something. It says something about this land. That this land is an inheritance for us. They can't say it. They keep saying the world doesn't want to hear about anything religious. It's got nothing to do with just religion. Most of the world that decides believes in the Bible. They believe in it as the founding scripture of human relations with God. As the modern form of human relations with God. There were ancient forms, which were idolatry, that's gone from the world. So why can't they say this? I'll say it in a different way. We're unfortunately running out of time, and I won't be able to get to the third claim, but I think it's enough, and you can read the rest in Wonders. The simple idea is that everyone in the world will treat things as coming, as events that are happening are the cause of self-interest. The United States has interests, Russia has interests, Iran has interests, Saudi Arabia has interests, China has interests, everybody has interests, and they're all protecting their interests. And then you can add to that into the equation, and Israel has interests. No, it's simply not true. Israel is the voice of good and justice in the world. It's not about interest. Goodness and justice are not interests that one party has and the others don't. It has to be a universal statement. And the Jewish people were founded not to have interests in the sense of, I want this much land, or I want that much gas reserves, or that much oil. It has nothing to do with that. The voice of Judaism has always been the voice of what is just and right and good in the world. That is not an interest. That is a universal value. And when everyone is speaking about interests, what the Jewish people should be speaking about, and this is what Abimelech is saying to Abraham, if you really represent holiness, let's see you speak in a different language. Let's see you say something that is not just another set of self-interests. Because what are you talking about? Are you talking about the fact that the well is for you and you need the water? That's self-interest. Abraham never said this. He never said, the well is not for me. The well is in order to allow commerce. It's in order to make a better world, to make to make stronger connections between people. He never said this. He never explained this. So what did they understand? That you dug the well and you want the water. We also want it. So what are we going to do? We'll dispute it, and eventually, if we're strong enough, we'll take it from you. But now that Abimelech is coming and saying, Abraham, you represent holiness, so he comes with this list of claims against Abraham's state, because Abraham now says, if I'm special, why did you take my well? So he says, because you never represented it the right way. You never explained what you were doing the right way. I'm not saying that it's so easy to explain this. He says it requires a lot of translation, because whenever you talk to us, we think you're talking about your interests. But you have to find a way to even talk to idolaters like Abimelech, a Philistine. Talk to him in a language that he'll understand, that human life has to evolve to a higher state. And if you represent holiness, you represent the key to that evolution, and you have to bring that. Again, the third claim, I recommend looking at it inside. It's even deeper than the first two. And I'm sorry we have to end with this. I wish everyone Shabbat Shalom. And next week, we'll continue, hopefully, with our regular schedule. Hope to see you next week also. Shabbat Shalom.